there was another woman that would come in and out of the house. Her name was April. Now, April was more of a caregiver, but April contacted me a couple of times when Mel was out of control and she was beating up on him. And I would tell her, call the police. And she wouldn't call the police because, it's against the code. They don't want to call the police. And so, I knew multiple times that there were people that were harming him and they were doing things to him that he would not say what was happening because then he would have to admit he was vulnerable.
Well, he had then at that point, it put him at
more risk.
You're right. When he didn't deserve to have his own rights. I'm not saying that he didn't deserve to have rights, but he needed somebody to be a guardian over him because he is out of control. He doesn't know what control is. He's been in an environment where
everything was controlled.
The system has been controlled, and he needed that. He needed structure. I, as an addict myself, do better in consistency. I thrive in consistency. Yeah. I do way better, and I know that Steven does as well because I've seen him. I've seen him when he showed up on my doorstep with you, asking me to go to a meeting.
Yeah.
Like, when he's sober, his eyes shine differently. His face shines differently. Like,
yeah,
everything about him just pops, and there's so much potential and energy in him that it's contagious. The smile, all of it, everything about him is like the whole package. I've never been with an addict in a day in my life like him.
Yeah.
When I met him, I was selling my soul. I was having sex with people for money and doing scandalous things. And for the first time in my life, somebody sat me down and said, this is what I expect out of you. This is what I expect out of a girlfriend or a wife or a lover. He said, no matter how many times you've been thrown away by the people around you, you're not trash. You're not that. This is who you are. This is what I see in you. And you can be all these things. And I've never had somebody be so kind and gentle to me and still love me no matter everything that I could say. And he still looked past all of that and seen the little girl inside of me that needed something. And he always catered to that. Like the day in the high speed, I lost my brother in the high speed. And he was like, I'm never going back to prison. I'm going to lose it in the streets. I'm going to fight in the streets. And I'm going to die in the streets. When we were getting pulled over, he was like, just look at me, Nina, and listen to me. Because I was already in a panic. You know what I'm saying? And I just did this shot of heroin. And I'm already like ODing basically. And he was like, everything that they say to do, they're going to pull guns. They're going to do this. They're going to do that. And Steven has never cared about anybody else or ever put anybody before himself. Ever. And I've never seen him do it. But that day, he did. He didn't. He's like, I'm not going to get out and run. I'm not going to let you watch them shoot me or kill me. He was like, just do everything that they say. And I've never seen him be more gentle with me and my kids than I have anybody in my life. Most addicts don't give a fuck. They don't give a fuck about your kids or anything.
Well, the day that he told me that he loved you, he said, I don't know how to convince her that I need her to be a lady. I was raised by my mother and my grandmother who were modest with their bodies, who were to be seen and not heard when it was appropriate to be in that way. He goes, I have to teach her how to be this way because what I want out of her is...
I didn't know how to give it because I didn't have it. I wasn't taught that.
He was saying, that's basically what he was saying. I'm going to have to teach her how to be this way. And he would say, Mom, I need to bring her home so she can see it. I need you to show her how to be this way because the crazy in her I need, but I also don't know anything other than what you and Grandma have ever emulated and shown for me. And I said to him then, this was a telephone call between him and I said to him, I said, you will change for the right woman, and the right woman will change for you. That's the only time somebody will ever change. And I said, so if that's really who you want to be with, then you have to also change if you ask her to change. And we had some pretty deep conversations during some sobriety, during some time that he was clean. And I know he meant everything he was saying to me, the same as you know he meant what he was saying to you. And then the demon would rise again. And he would be off again on another tangent. But let me circle back to, I don't mean to take away the importance of what you're sharing here, because that is important. And as a mom, it can't make me prouder that he wanted those values that I emulated. He wanted those same values in the person he chose to spend his time with, right? That's what every mother wants for their son, is to find somebody that he can bring home and we're all proud of. You know, we accepted you, Nina, with all your flaws. And we tried everything we could sometimes to show you more, show you better, show you love, show you grace, show you kindness. And also boot up your ass when it was needed. Or my husband yell at you from the other part of the house, stop fucking burping.
Burrito.
You know, we knew in some ways you were a teenager that needed to be taught differently than what you had seen. But that didn't mean, I mean, in order for someone to invest in that time with you, it meant we already cared about you. Because if you don't care about somebody, you're not going to invest that time in. And when Stephen was at the tail end of his life, I didn't necessarily know it was the tail end of his life. I could feel it. Stephen had lived in a state of pending doom for so long that it was another day of incredible anxiety of knowing the end is coming. But I knew he was talking to you. I knew it because Mel was pissed off and she was fighting with him because your name kept being brought up. She hated that you still had
her.
Yes, he did. He was, you know, he didn't fight fair either. But I knew that you were still engaged in that in some manner. I had talked to you off and on throughout that last 6 months at different points of time, not regularly. But when Stephen, him and Mel had several bouts of she would leave and move out, and then I would have to step in, or Amanda would have to help out. You know, he would let us in the door when everybody else was unwilling to help or unsafe to help. But the last week that he was alive, it was very touch and go every day with his unpredictable drug behavior. So I had a phone call about 1 o'clock in the morning from the hospital stating that he had been brought in and that they wanted to know if I was still his guardian at that time. And I said, no, I'm technically not his guardian, but I'm still his mother. I said, is he okay? And she would say, he's okay in the moment. And I said, can you please tell me his condition? And they wouldn't tell me his condition. They just basically said, well, since you're not his guardian, we're not going to tell you anything more. I went up there the next morning to try to get information. They violated his HIPAA by telling me he was intubated, but they wouldn't let me go see him. So I had a full-on fit in the emergency room. I had security escort me off the property.
And he had that DNR, and they still did it anyway.
Yeah,
they resuscitated him.
He had a DNR.
To start off with,
So I screamed at them, I'm headed to the attorney's office to go get an emergency guardianship. You better get him out of your fucking hospital before I come back. He cannot be in this hospital. You don't have the standard of care, or you don't have the level of care he requires. You're a tiny little county hospital, and he is medically fragile, and now he's intubated. You better get him transported if you know what's best for you.
Yeah.
And they did. They got him transported probably within the hour of me having that fit.
Yeah, because
And then I went to Truman Medical Center where he was transported to. I did have the guardianship papers in hand. I got them guardianship papers in less than 3 hours.
Yeah, well, because we were talking every day there towards the end, and he kept asking me to come down and commit crimes with him and bring him drugs down, and I'm like, yeah, I'm on my way. It was the only way to keep getting information from him and keep him docile at the same time. And, and I didn't hear from him for like 2 days. And that's when I called you, and you were like, it was that you said it the exact same way. The exact same way. It was like the exact same wording. And it was eating it all over again. Like,
well, hang on.
the day that he got shot, when you told me he was there, like, it just, like, fucking everything flooded back. It was like the same tone, everything.
So I went and got the emergency guardianship papers. I went to Truman Medical Center. I probably didn't even need the papers. They let me straight in, and he was intubated, so now he couldn't give his
denial of don't let her in here or whatever.
Well,
bullshit.
But the thing is when somebody is that ill and that sick, 9 times out of 10, they do let family in.
Oh, yeah.
Because they're scared now. It's no longer keep mom away because she won't let me use drugs. It's oh God, I need my family.
Yeah.
So that hospital erred on that side of family. If family's showing up here, it's obvious because they care.
And it gives them a better ideal of what
I was able to tell them what was going on.
What psychosis is and all
right.
that.
And so there was he was there a total of 6 days, 6 or 7 days. And he came in on a ventilator, and then 2 days later, they were trying to pull him off the ventilator, and they had him on some type of forced air mask. I mean, it was a little more aggressive than just a BiPAP. Yeah. And he still couldn't talk because he couldn't keep his air oxygen or his count up high enough to have a conversation.
He was just little words.
And he was very out of it, and he was going through withdrawal. So they had him on Suboxone, and they were giving him too much Suboxone, and they couldn't wake him up. They ran Narcan and reversed everything, trying to get him coherent. And he had about a half a day where he knew who was in the room.
He talked to Amanda that day.
He talked to Amanda that day.
He told Amanda that he wanted to talk to you because he knew he was going to die. He had something to tell you. I remember that. And then
Amanda, and I actually took Amanda she met me at the hospital.
Yeah.
I stepped out of the room so she could be in there so he could talk to her without me right there.
Yeah.
And then I stayed with him in that room. They were very strict about visiting hours. I could not stay at the.
They made you leave during the switch or the shift.
But the last day that he was coherent enough to be able to minimum conversation
was that Sunday with that doctor, because the first day that I came, and when he flatlined, that doctor that came in said that Sunday night
he did not want to be intubated.
He didn't want to be intubated, but they had a good conversation that Stephen was there. Like, he was communicating, and he said he was able to understand what Stephen's needs were or whatever.
I watched the Chiefs game with him. He reached for my hand, and Stephen can't grab and pull your hand, but he flopped his arm over on top of me and kept pushing his arm. And I laced my fingers with him. I said, "Is that what you want?" And he said, "Yes." And at that point, I realized he was reaching for comfort. Yeah. And I got up and I was holding his hand, and I was in his face. I said, "Stephen, you're going to be okay. No matter what happens, you're going to be okay." And him and he just kind of looked at me. He was clear-eyed, clear-minded, and I just said, "I love you." And he looked at me and he shook his head, and I said, "All is forgiven. All is forgiven. Always, it will always be that way between you and I." And I finished watching the game. He told the nurse, he had a male nurse there, and he told the nurse, after him and I had that very touching moment, he told that male nurse, "That's my mom. Don't fuck with her."
He said that all the time.
He said, don't fuck with her. And super mom. And, it took him a long time to get those words out. It wasn't like, hey, that's my mom, don't fuck with her. It was labored in between each word. And it touched me deeply that he said that in my presence, because the last 6 months of his life, he had been in such psychosis that those were not words I had ever thought I'd hear again.
I think that he knew
He knew
that
he was
gonna
dying.
die, and the only way to protect you was to push you away. And that's, in his mind, the more angry you are at him, the easier you're going to take the blow. And that's not the case, because as soon as that happens, all the anger's gone, and you're just riddled with heartbreak, and it's not easy to come back from that. It's like
The next morning when I came back, the doctor, they are lifesavers. And especially in that level of trauma, he was, telling me, okay, this is happening. He's intubated now again because his O2s went down. He
had to
has
keep it above 80, and he couldn't do it.
He couldn't do it
on his own.
And he had mucus building up, and they had to go in and do a suction of the lungs. And so they needed to put a ventilator in there to be able to reach it, to be able to do it. They surgically went in there first to do it. They said that he should see some improvement in the next few hours. Well, he didn't improve. And then the next 12 hours, he started to decline again. And by the next day, he was at 100% fully supported by intubation, and the oxygen level. At that point, that's when he flatlined. That's when, I had called you in there from the first.
Yeah, when you called and
he first was intubated and he was going downhill, I called you.
Yeah, you called and you said it. Because at first when I called, you said, no, not right now. I want to see what happens.
Yeah.
Let's just hold off and wait. So I said, okay, just as long as when it's time that I could please come, because me and Steven made a bond that when he died, we were going to go together. And at the time, I wasn't ready to go. I just became a grandma, and there was so much shit going on.
And he didn't expect that, Nina. That's just what crazy people say to each other. You know that.
I know that. But, when I came in and, instantly, there's certain things about him you can never forget, the sarcastic looks on his face and the little shits. When we came in the room for the first time, and I had pumped gas and got a fountain drink before I got there. And you're just reminding me which ear he's deaf in. But when I walked in, I locked eyes with him. He's looking at me, that irritated look on his face. And when you start saying something about talk on this side, because I'm in my mind, I'm like, she does know we were together for 4 years. I know which damn ear he's deaf in. He closed his fucking eyes because you told me he's not going to be able to know that you're here. He's in a coma-like state because he's on so much drugs. And I remember them saying that he was on 3 times the normal fentanyl amount.
I hadn't seen any movement in him, in any reaction of anything I had said to him or doctors had said to him for probably 12 to 15 hours. I hadn't.
Yeah.
He appeared as if he was in deep sedation. Yeah.
So I washed my hands, and I came over to that side of the bed, and I just told him I was here. I loved him, and I wasn't going anywhere. And I asked him if he loved me. I was like, I love you. He nodded his head a little bit, and then I'm like, boy, he nodded that fucking head. I was like, two-step, and as soon as I started that, he started shaking his shoulders. And I think all the excitement, that was his way of telling me bye. He showed up and he showed the fuck out, just like I expected him to do. And then he flatlined right there. And I knew at that moment, that was him saying, I'm done, Nina. There's nothing left in me. When he originally got shot, there was so much more to him. There was more bone to it. There was more meat.
He was so fragile.
There was the able for him to be down that long, but this time there was nothing left of him. They had already taken his spirit. He was so broken at this point. He was welcoming death. is the thing.
He
But
was ready.
he was scared to go alone. And I'm glad that I got to lay there with him and stuff, and I kissed him on his ear, like right there on the side of his head. And I'm like, it's okay, you can go, and I'm gonna be right here, and I'm gonna wait. I'm not gonna leave until it's that time, you know. I can't explain it, but I can feel him when I pull on their property. I can always feel him, and it never goes away. But I'm glad that he is in peace right now, and I know he's in a better place. He's fucking walking. I guarantee Jesus has got a face tattoo right now, and they're thugging it out up there, talking shit about their moms. Look at both these little crybaby ass bitches down here crying, and I'm still up here thugging it out, still doing exactly what I want to be doing. And that's what I love about him. No matter how much shit or how down he was, like, he never changed. He always stayed true to the person that he was. And he always found a way to figure it out. No matter what, he always got his way. If that's what he said he was going to do, that motherfucker did it.
He figured out a way to do it.
The only thing he didn't do was that one last stolo. He wanted me to be able to steal a truck and then put him so close to me that he could drive the truck from the passenger side with one arm. I'm like, oh shit! I'm gonna have to tie his hand to the wheel like I did the vacuum.
He wanted to go out a thug.
He did.
That's all he wanted.
He said that he was,
and we were dealing with town gossip.
Oh yeah,
and bullshit as he was laying there dying. And
people sneaking up there taking pictures of him. Why he was like, you're not family. And why the fuck would you come into a hospital and take pictures of somebody on a ventilator that's dying? And, and they're saying, oh, he's never, like the doctor, the kid was so young. You were talking to Jim and them.
Yeah,
when he came
that
out,
doctor was trying to convince me that Stephen could come back from this the first day or so.
Yeah.
But then when Stephen
like, no.
just kept going further down and further down, and that's when that doctor, I came in that morning, I had sat with his dad. His dad was here.
Yeah.
I had sat with his dad. I had sat with my husband. I had talked to you. I'd talked to his brother was flying. I'd already got him flown in. And I said, listen, if Stephen had a DNR on file, and I don't know where it's at, but we've already gone further than what Stephen would have wanted.
Yeah, because they said he was never coming off that ventilator.
Yeah.
He would never be able to talk again.
Right.
And he would be on a feeding tube for the rest of his life. He would have
a trach the rest of his life. And so I said, if we go in tomorrow and there's not been any improvement, we have to make the decision that this may be the end. And I said, I can't make that decision until we go in tomorrow and see them. So when we went in that next day, and we were all there that next day. We were all stood around and, watched to see if there was any improvement. And when there was going to be no improvement, in fact, he was steadily declining.
Gone. He was already gone.
And the facial features had started to drop, and there was. We just knew
there was no color left in it.
Yeah, we just knew it was time.
You could tell his eyes were still open. You could see that there was no life. There was no shine. There was no color to the eye. Like, you could tell when somebody's gone. I think that he left when he flatlined, when we were first there. And then we were sitting in the lobby, and the lady comes out, and we both think that she's going to say that he's dead. But when that doctor came out, I knew then and there, everything that he was going to say from that point on was bad, because number one, he was young, and he had somebody with him, but he did his mannerism. He goes and kicked his leg down weird, because he was dreading what he was going to say. He's like, basically, he's not coming back from this. He's going to have to be in a nursing home for the rest of his life. He is not coming off that ventilator. He's not coming off a feeding tube. He's going to be in, like, he's going to, he has no life. He has no life already. You know what I'm saying? So you're about to take what little bit he does have from him. He would have driven his wheelchair off of stairs in the hospital. He would have found a way.
He would have found a
He
way
would have
to have
found a
ended
way
his
to-
life had he
he had
been
to
able
stay
to
like
even
that.
come back far enough
Yeah.
to it. And I know that. And that's the reason why I said there has to be some dignity at this point.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you know, I'm sharing this more because I know there are other families that have, you know, they dread that this may be where their life is going, but there's also families that have been right here where we're
Yeah.
at and had to make those decisions. And I know that when we made those decisions and they came in and they removed all life support off of him and they turned off all of the noise to anything. So all we had was watching him breathe. And we made sure that he was heavily medicated so he wasn't suffering. He wasn't struggling for air. And when I made sure that you were next to him and Jennifer was there and Logan was there and I was there and even his dad, which really surprised me, he came in one more time. He did not want to be there when he passed.
No.
But he did come back to the hospital and he did come see him at the very end. You came and my husband came and said his last goodbyes. And it wasn't until after I made sure that everybody had their chance that it made me go, wait a minute, I haven't said anything to him yet.
There's no words for a mother to say that I think that prepares somebody to say goodbye to their kids. There's no amount of any words that you can say. And I know that he was there holding you. He was there.
Do you remember what I said to him?
Yeah, it was okay that Grandma was there and Chris was there waiting on him, and it was okay to go, that you were going to be okay, that it was all going to be okay. And I
I
believe
gave him permission to go.
we all did, I think. I just told him, I said, make sure you come back for me when it's my time. Don't leave me here.
And I told him that I'm going to walk you to the gates and you have to go from here.
Yep.
And Stephen passed very shortly after I said those two words, or those few words. And we were, I was so grateful to be there. I was so grateful to be there at the end for him. Because there was a lot of years that I didn't think that I would be there. I was scared to death he would die in a flop house. I was scared to death he would die and they would roll him off into a ditch. I was scared that he was going to die and I would get a phone call from some frantic drug addict. I gave him dignity and made sure the people that loved him were close by when they said their final goodbyes.
He did what any mother could do for their kid. He was surrounded by loved ones, and he was where he was supposed to be and with people that cared about him, instead of a bunch of drug addicts that weren't going to do a damn thing for him to help him or comfort him. They would have let him die miserably, just like they fucking let him sit in his wheelchair for 3 days and things like that. When there's just so much to it. It's like so crazy how these people are still free. Like you,
and they didn't realize. I mean, I kept screaming at them how fragile he was, and they just didn't care.
They don't get it because it's not their responsibility. It's not their loved ones. It's not.
Made no attempt to be fragile
they weren't
with
losing
him.
Sleep overnight at night, let him suffer.
You know, and in his psychosis, at times he was not going to let me come help him.
No, he wasn't.
You know, but
He was embarrassed, is what it was. He was ashamed that he stunk, and all these things, because that's not who he was. That man's never been dirty unless he was running from the police, and
unless he wanted to be.
Yeah.
He could be dirty, but he knew he could get a shower, but
clean up quick.
right.
There
But
was no.
for him to have the lack of hygiene and care that he had in the end, I was so angry at the people that were around him that didn't have the decency to make sure he didn't.
Yeah, he wouldn't even let me come down sometimes because he was.
He would say that to me.
I'm embarrassed of how I look and smell right now. He's like, you can't come down here.
There would be times he would tell me, I need to talk to you, Mom, but I can't talk to you until I can get somebody to come over here and clean me up. And it might be 2 days before he would
hear
say,
back from him.
okay, I'm clean, you can come.
Yeah.
I mean,
Like he would.
but they would come over and get high. They'd come over and use his shower.
And
They'd
not
come
shower
over
him.
and eat his food, but they wouldn't clean him up.
Yeah,
and he wouldn't let me come in to clean him up.
He was calling me, asking me to come down and clean him up, and then he'd be like, change his mind. He'd be like, no, I don't want you to see me like this. Like sometimes when I video chat, he would shut his camera off so I couldn't see like how bad he was and things like that. And I'm just like, fuck. That's how I knew it was really bad, because he's never hid anything from me. Not the good, bad, the ugly. I've seen it all. But when he would turn his camera off, then I knew things were really bad down here.
Yeah. Whew, Nina, we went through a bunch here. Okay, I am going to say you did a fabulous job of talking and walking through some of the most painful moments in my life, and I know that they were difficult for you. And I made a promise to Stephen that you would always remain in our family, and we've held that. And Logan, my younger son, him and I have both had that conversation that regardless of whatever happens, we lost Stephen, but we're not going to lose Nina. So I want you to know that we will always be your family.
It means a lot to me.
You know, we survived Stephen, and we trauma bonded, and I am forever grateful for the care that you gave him and the love that you shared with him. I am forever grateful that you met his crazy at the same level, and I understood when you had to go, and I stood and I yelled at you and told you it was time to go, because I knew you needed to hear me give you permission to leave, because of the guilt of leaving him. You knew it wasn't going to end well in the end, and I don't want you to live with that guilt. I want you to know everybody tried to help Stephen. Everyone that loved and cared about him tried to help him. Stephen was his own worst enemy. And somewhere we have to find a place to forgive him for the harm that he caused himself and us for loving him. And I'll keep working on that, and I know you will too.
I don't regret any of it, though. I'll never regret any.
I don't either. I would do it all over again today if I had the opportunity. There's days I wish, one more day of crazy. Come on, Stephen, show me something. Because we lived in that crazy turmoil for so long. I don't want to say that I miss it, but I also don't know what to do with myself because we're not here. You know, it's not here anymore. I mean, I have to be honest. It ruined me, but it also, I don't know what to do without it. And I think that's part of the reason why I wanted to do this podcast, and I want to go out and help families, and I wanted to talk to people about what addiction really looks like, and the families that are left in disarray. Yeah, they're left in the disarray of what addiction is, and you feel like you're the only ones going through it. That's why I wanted us to talk, because we were in the cyclone of addiction, and we've survived it.
Yeah.
You know, and now we tell that story. All right, you guys, I'm going to go ahead and conclude today's podcast. Thank you for joining us. Beyond the Storm is going to be a series of people who have been in every step of addiction, whether it be the family members, whether it's other people that have had a history of addiction and their sobriety path and their journey. At some point, we'll interview Nina again, and we'll talk about her journey. Right now, today, we really just talked about Stephen, but we'll get Nina back out here, and we'll do some storytelling about her. And I apologize for all the tears, but this is what real life looks like when you're dealing with somebody who was 25 years in the trenches of addiction. You guys, thank you so much for joining us today. Take care.